What's up, guys? Matt here with Life is for Enjoying. During this isolation period, I've decided to do knock out some of the projects on the RV that I've been putting off for a while. And so I decided to go ahead and do a Soggy Saga wrap-up video. If you haven't paid attention to previous videos, the Soggy Saga is what I've called uh, the nonsense adventure that has been this RV's leak since day one that I bought it. I parked on the driveway like I am right now, and it's slightly downhill, nose down. And when I came back to it to drive it after parking it there and it rained, water had filled up in the nose. So as soon as I tried to drive away, I um, I went up a hill and the water poured onto me on the driver's seat. And that was in the first week of owning this thing, and it's been a nonstop event ever since. So I just wanted to do a quick wrap-up video, mainly inverted mic, because the user that has been following along, I know he's got an Outlaw as well of similar year, similar model. So he was concerned about what he should be looking for on his model. And so I wanted to just kind of do a wrap-up of all the things that they found, I found, they fixed, they didn't fix, I fixed, stuff like that. Just to kind of show you the things to look for, especially if you have a Thor Outlaw 29H or 29J, they're very similar models. But other Class C RVs might have similar issues. So these are the sorts of things to look for, but especially if you have this RV. So anyway, let's get started. So this window up here is where the issue started. Basically, this is the cab over area over the driver's seat, and we happen to have a window over here. And this is where the problem was most evident. But basically, after the first time I got water on myself while I was driving, I came up here to start looking around and see if I could find any signs of moisture. And sure enough, there was actually like water dripping down from inside the window here, and it was soaking all of this wood here. Mold was forming all back here and in this cup holder assembly and stuff like that. There was just very obviously water intrusion right here. And so at the very beginning of the Soggy Saga, I focused most of my attention here, and I reported that the window was leaking. But what was actually happening was things leaking from the top. So even though there's no window over here, water was actually getting in on this side as well. It was just much less obvious because it was making it down the entire wall inside here before it hit this platform, and then was making it all the way into the nose area. So even though water was actually having intrusion issues on this side as well, it wasn't nearly as obvious because on the side with the window, as soon as the water gets to the window portion, it is forced to go around it and would kind of fill up inside the window under here, and then had a gap right here a gap right under the window that the water could exit out of. So water was actually coming in through here, and some of it continuing down the wall until it hit this floor platform here. So it gives you an idea what the water was actually doing. And actually, I have a thermal camera, so I took some thermal photos after some rainy days, and you were able to see that water intrusion was happening from all across the top right here and on the other side as well. But since I didn't know all of that off the get-go, the original thought was it had something to do with this window. Now, I'll show you some of the things that we looked at this window, but when I first brought it back to them, I just said, there's a leak in the front, figure it out, fix it, and give it back. And they decided it was an issue with a screw. They didn't tell me which screw, but I think it was just like one of these mounting screws they decided was the issue, because it like wasn't perfectly put in, and they had to re-drill a hole and put another screw in or something along those lines. That's what they decided the problem was. And that was the first round of repairs. So after I got it back, and it was still having the exact same issue, I brought it upon myself to do some more research and investigation. So one thing worth noting here is, since this is a frameless window, you can see the top right here makes a nice little kind of channel. Oops, focus is being weird. There we go. It makes a nice little channel right here. And after it was raining and the RV was parked nose down, I actually noticed that water up here was kind of reaching this little threshold right here and just forming a stream off to the side, and it was going right to this channel. So my thought was maybe it was just a problem with the way this window was working and the fact that water was coming straight off the side and just kind of getting into this channel and filtering in. So one thing I did, and I still recommend it, I haven't redone it since they replaced the window, but that is do some caulking across the top of this seam. The window hinge itself is inside here, so you're not going to be messing with that at all by caulking across the top, and it would make me feel better having that sealed up, so you know the water's not getting into there, going into the window and trickling down. So that's just the thing to do with these frameless windows. Another thing I did originally, but I've now taken it down, is I put up, there was an adhesive gutter sort of thing that you can add on, and I put a gutter here and wrapped it all the way along this curve to drain off to the front, just to, once again, any water that was coming off of the roof and going off the side, instead of going to the window, it would just kind of redirect it around the outside. So I do recommend those sorts of things if you're having any leak issues, but as you can tell, those aren't even the case on mine anymore, and it's not leaking. So I don't think those are direct problems, but they're things I noticed, things I thought of. So keep those in mind. Moving on, after the first round didn't work, and I came across these things and I resealed it and whatnot, they decided it was the window itself. And so they replaced this entire window. They decided there was a crack or something in it that they couldn't see, so they replaced the entire window. But that didn't solve it either, obviously. I also, along those lines, before they replaced it, I redid all of these seals along the window with butyl tape. Originally it was I forget what the original one was, but now they have this what looks like rubber D-shaped weather stripping, and it seems to be working pretty well, so that's fine. But I think that was an improvement with this the new window when they replaced it. So after the first one was leaking, I actually took the window out, resealed it with butyl tape before I did the caulking across the top. So those are things to look for with the window, but like I said, that did not end up being the actual issue. Now our screws every 2.5 inches here, so a very easy spot for water to get in if the die core wears down or whatnot. There's water intrusion possibility there. So that was one of the things I tried, was I actually went over this entire strip with some extra die core. Now coming back along this line, and I actually just noticed there's more gaps forming. I need to reseal these guys. So it's good that I'm up here. I'm going to go ahead and do that. But one thing I noticed, and I think may have been attributed to the actual problem, was this bit right here that you can see where the curve, seam, whatever that's called, is terminating. Right now it is folding over, I believe. It's folding over this end and then going in. What they originally had here was they folded it over, tucked it in, and then drilled a screw down in from the top. I think that may have been a contributing one, because that's what they did differently after they replaced things, and now the leak is no longer happening. Don't know that that was the case, but it might be. So if you see the screw on the top, at least cover that thing in like die core or whatever. If not, kind of take it somewhat apart and try to redo it in a better way. But like you can see, that is better. The other thing was, when I was going to get things replaced, I decided to go ahead and take all of this edge seam off, and do some investigation and see if I could find any better way to seal things up. And I noticed that this entire corner, all the way down, they had only used, I think, 3/4 inch seam tape, seal tape, seam tape, whatever that was called. They only used 3/4 inch stuff, and that wasn't enough to cover the entire gap. So there were actually openings on this seam underneath this. So if any water got into here, which you can see there's some extra caulking there now, obviously, but that wasn't originally there. So any water that could get into this seam was pooling up underneath on the inside, and then could very easily get into the seam, into the wall that way. So that may have been a contributing factor as well. And they actually, speaking of that seam tape, there was a gap about this big right here. And I'm assuming a similar gap on the other side from mismeasuring or running out of tape when they originally did it. But there was a section here that was completely unsealed, except for what you see on the top. So since these sorts of things are hidden away from view, I think it passes their quality control because they're done and then covered up. And so quality control then looks over things and says, looks good to me, because they can't see what's happening underneath these seams. So unfortunately, that's a hard one to repair because it requires you to take this metal corner trim off, reseal it, and then put the trim back. And in the process of pulling this off, you will bend it and damage it, and you have to get a brand new whole pre-bent corner seal to redo it. So wouldn't really recommend doing that on your own, but what you can do is just go crazy with the sealant across this, especially across this top edge here, to just make sure this is completely filled in and watertight to that degree. You can see the caulking just kind of stops right here because it's far enough down that water should be able to just kind of keep going and not worry about intrusion too much. But especially along this top edge, go ahead and just fill all of these edges with caulking. So anyway, like I said, the other side was doing the same thing. So whatever the issue was symmetrical. I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that the seal tape over on this side was doing a similar sort of thing underneath. But I do believe that the screw was here on top as well. So that could have been another contributing factor. So anyway, those are about all the things. It took multiple trips back and forth to come up with all those things. In the end, Thor manufacturer actually ended up replacing the front two panels of 4x8 Luan under the roof, and then the entire roof liner has been replaced. Unfortunately, that replacement didn't quite go so well. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but there's a buckle here at the seam of the two Luan panels. So got to deal with that. Don't know how I'm going to fix that one, but the saga continues, I guess. Anyway, about wraps it up. If you have any more questions about it, feel free to let me know. But I think I covered all of the main concerns that happened during the back and forth. Like I said, it wasn't until the entire roof liner was replaced, the entire pre-bends were replaced, everything was resealed, that the leak went away. So it's really hard to know for sure what the final culprit was, because they changed so much as the final shotgun remedy. But those are all things to be aware of. Also, obviously, around the vent is there's a lot of die-core stuff there too. I redid that one a couple times. So all stuff to think about. Hopefully that helps. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks, guys. Bye.